Thank you, honorable members. The Assembly will now resume its sitting. The member for Island Harbor will continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I had just started talking about thanking the members for interventions. Madam Speaker, it's, we try to do what is right. And certainly, it's, when we got in, we found that there was significant contingent liability when we did the review back in 2020. And one of those was the Health Authority of Anguilla, the statutory body, Madam Speaker. And we were basically told that we needed to decrease contingent liability, decrease arrears, balance budgets. Madam Speaker, it was mentioned earlier that there was a lot of rancor and uproar, and it continues to state by the members of the opposition that this administration raised up to 18 sets of fees, Madam Speaker. And now we can understand why, Madam Speaker, because the arrears that were met. Madam Speaker, there was money owed to Anglec by the Health Authority. There was money owed to the Water Corporation. And Madam Speaker, I'm sure that you'll hear in a little bit when we are debating the return of the Water Corporation back into central government, some of the issues that were there with water, where the contingent liability of water to Anglec of over $16 million that this administration has had to make arrangements with the payment plan to pay that debt, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we don't want to get there with the Health Authority of Anguilla. Because the thing about it is, Madam Speaker, as we've heard, that there are issues with the financials, with the audits, concerns about monies being unaccounted for, Madam Speaker. We could end up in a similar position where, Madam Speaker, we have to take drastic steps, whether it's in financing these gaps, or, Madam Speaker, is it better for us to curb this right where it is now, bring the Health Authority of Anguilla back into the Ministry of Health, where there's better oversight, there's better management, Madam Speaker, better budgetary management, better balance of the use of funds, more staffing, medical, nursing, more equipment, comprehensive salary review with consideration of cost of living, job descriptions, whether technical or administrative staff, which would determine how they are paid, Madam Speaker, grading, increments, performance reviews. Madam Speaker, this is all allowed because once you employ public sector principals, then we know that the accounting officer, who is the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Health, will have to give account, Madam Speaker. And because it is a public service, there's a lot of oversight. And I heard, Madam Speaker, the issues raised about the public sector and the public service being burdensome, full of bureaucracy. And I'm sure that the Honorable Deputy Governor who sits in this House will be able to take some of that back and know that that public sector reform, which has been talked about ad nauseum, now needs to be followed up on. Madam Speaker, I find it very curious that the Leader of the Opposition talked about the health sector reform of 2011, we talked about using the National Health Fund. Understanding, Madam Speaker, that the National Health Fund, the legislation was passed in January of 2008, was never funded under the AUF administration. Then you had the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And then the Anguilla United movement came into power in February of 2010, and there was this health commission that was put in place, Madam Speaker, and the report we've seen, which came out in July of 2010. And there's a lot made of that. They suggested staying with a statutory body form. But they also talked, Madam Speaker, about higher executive power, such as using a secretary or commissioner of health. So they recommended a restructuring, Madam Speaker, of the health service provider, at that time the Health Authority of Anguilla. And the reason they gave for wanting to remain a statutory body was they said what they said about the public service. But Madam Speaker, I'd rather that our health care comes under the public service, where there is better oversight and management, where there's better accountability, than to leave it hanging out there in the wilderness, Madam Speaker. Because then, as Minister of Health, where I'm held responsible for the delivery of health care for the people of Anguilla, I cannot have the say and given direction as to where the health services should go, Madam Speaker. But as I was saying, the interim stabilization levy was put in place for budgetary support, but the Chief Minister at the time in 2011 said that he was hoping that this would last for 1 year, and then the ISL would be converted to funding health care, the National Health Fund. The previous AUF administration and campaigning for 2015 said that they would get rid of the ISL, some said from day one. But during the time of 2015 to 2020, Madam Speaker, when the AUF was in power, they at no time talked about the National Health Fund. They talked at no time about restructuring the Health Authority of Anguilla. They talked at no time about shoring up the providing health care for the people of Anguilla. In fact, Madam Speaker, I remember that the day after Hurricane Irma, former Governor Tim Foy, when he visited the hospital with the former Premier, who was Chief Minister at that time, the Honorable Victor Banks, Governor Tim Foy said that the hospital was inadequate to provide health care in these modern times. And so that may have led to some of the monies from the humanitarian aid of the £60 million going towards upgrading the hospital, Madam Speaker. Now, I heard the member for Sandy Hill, leader of the opposition, say that it was the former member for Road North, the Minister for Social Services, that did a lot of this on his own, Madam Speaker. But the funding was there. I know that the CT scanner, that was paid for by donors. I know Anglec was a donor. I know that there are some visitors to Anguilla who are now villa owners who contributed. Certainly, I understand what that takes, Madam Speaker, because we were able, through the Richard Schultz Foundation, to get the MRI scanner, which is now working again, Madam Speaker, because, you know, it's difficult down here in this heat for some of this sensitive equipment to survive the weather. But it's getting shored up, and we've been asked to provide, you know, a building to cover it, and that is in the works, Madam Speaker, with part of the capital budget for this year. Madam Speaker, the Public Accounts Committee report of 2019 did also reference about the Health Authority of Anguilla and its auditing issues, at financing issues. But again, the former Anguilla United Front administration did nothing to make improvements in the Health Authority of Anguilla, Madam Speaker. And so I am perturbed, Madam Speaker, that there would be such disdain for this transition, Madam Speaker. In fact, the member for Valley North, she does protest too much, Madam Speaker. And maybe that was a promise that she made to her predecessor, who is opposed to the transition, Madam Speaker. It was mentioned, Madam Speaker, in one of the reports about how the Health Authority was a dismal failure. Now, Madam Speaker, that's not talking about the nurses and the doctors who were doing a great job taking care of patients and doing their best to keep the people of Anguilla healthy. And I want to commend them for their service, Madam Speaker. But what I have noticed, Madam Speaker, and maybe they will block the doors for me being able to go back to the hospital to see patients and do surgery, Madam Speaker. So at the risk of that, Madam Speaker, I just can say that, I have been put in this position as the Minister of Health to ensure that what the responsibilities that were given to the Health Authority, that we do follow through on that, Madam Speaker. And I feel that it is necessary to bring the Health Authority of Anguilla back into the Ministry of Health as the Department of Health Services so that we can accomplish this, Madam Speaker, to make sure that we can provide primary, secondary, and even tertiary health care as needed for the people of Anguilla to decrease disease and injury, Madam Speaker, as is stated in the responsibilities from the Health Authority Act of 2003. Madam Speaker, the member for Valley North talked about the power of the minister in the previous Health Authority Act. Madam Speaker, I'd like to read Clause 2 of the Health Authority Act of 2003. Clause 2, subsection 1. On the recommendation of the minister, the governor and council may establish a strategic plan for health for Anguilla. Subsection 2, the minister is responsible under this act for the implementation of the strategic plan for health in relation to the authority. Madam Speaker, the only authority that I have as the Minister of Health under this act is to select the members of the board, and they go to Executive Council to be ratified, and it's given as to who or what positions those members should have: medical doctor, a nurse, member of the public, somebody with finance experience. These are the things that are given, Madam Speaker. Very prescriptive and very limited, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, you'd think that you select a board that understands the vision that you have, and then they go in and they try to implement that. Madam Speaker, that is dependent, of course, on the board. Now, I must say that the board that I've selected has tried, Madam Speaker, but sometimes you have such a big, awkward organization that it's hard for them to move it in the direction that it needs to go. So I want to compliment and thank the boards that I have been responsible for. And I also want to thank the members of the Health Service Reform Board, Madam Speaker, because I think that they did their best to ensure that they met with staff, met with the supervisors, they met with the private doctors in the community. Now, that wasn't given as one of the mandates, but they felt it necessary to find out from the private doctors how they felt about the Health Authority of Anguilla and how they felt it could be better. And they came up with the decision of inviting them to, when PAHO came in last summer, to meet with PAHO, so that as PAHO was given how to transition or to help with the transition process, and given their ideas, Madam Speaker. Now we do know that the Ministry of Health is tasked with getting a contract with the Health Authority for the delivery of healthcare services. And that, Madam Speaker, is the extent that the ministry have with the Health Authority. Once that contract is signed, then because, as has been stated in previous reports, there's no member of the Ministry of Health that is allowed on the board of the Health Authority, Madam Speaker. And I think that that is a weakness, because I think that there should be representation on the board of the Health Authority from the Ministry of Health. But after April 1st, Madam Speaker, that's not necessary, because as the Department of Health Services, the minister, the permanent secretary, the health commissioner, the deputy health commissioner, will then have the ability to direct how healthcare services will be given and done, and the direction that will be carried out going forward, Madam Speaker. And I think this is going to be better for all Anguillians. Madam Speaker, something that really makes me proud is that we have the Senior Shield, Madam Speaker, that provides free health care for Anguillians 70 years and older in the public health system. Now, Madam Speaker, we had budgeted for about 750 or so persons. Madam Speaker, there are 1,088 persons are registered right now, which shows, Madam Speaker, that Anguillians who are even living abroad have come to sign up for Senior Shield, so that when they come home, if they're 70 years or older, that they would have access to the health care. Madam Speaker, they have an interest in being able to access quality, affordable, accessible health care. And that is something that I, as the Minister of Health, elected by the people in that role, I have to ensure that that happens, Madam Speaker. And so that is why, one of the reasons why the Health Authority is being transitioned back into the Ministry of Health. Now the question was asked, why the rush, Madam Speaker? Well, I really don't think that 4+ years is rushing. But maybe that I have a different definition, even though my name is Webster and we wrote the dictionary. Madam Speaker, we can change it. But, you know, I don't know. Madam Speaker, this would have happened before. But we had COVID, Madam Speaker. And there's no way that, as a responsible physician and this responsible administration, that we would make this change during a health crisis, Madam Speaker. So we waited that out, Madam Speaker. But we saw, Madam Speaker, that a health crisis requires that the government has to be intimately involved in the decision-making. And so that's what happened, Madam Speaker, that we were able to, during COVID, with the assistance of the Chief Medical Officer, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Health, the Health Planner, the Director for a Chronic Disease Unit, you know, we were able to steer the ship through, Madam Speaker, with limited loss of life, although any life lost is a lot. But it could have been worse, Madam Speaker. We were also able to get the country opened up in a phased manner, Madam Speaker. And we have gotten accolades from all over the world, Madam Speaker, for the way Anguilla was able to ride through the COVID-19 pandemic. And that was not by accident or coincidence, Madam Speaker. That's because we had the know-how and the wherewithal, and we followed the science, but we also cared about the lives and livelihoods of the people of Anguilla. And Madam Speaker, that same commitment will continue as we take over the health services, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the nurses have met with us. And we try to allay their fears and their concerns. Madam Speaker, any change is concerning, but this change is for the better. And so, Madam Speaker, I want to assure the nurses that we'll continue to listen to them. They're concerned about overtime and on-call. Madam Speaker, I met just this morning with the committee discussing that. And so we will continue to work out the formulas, starting out with the ones that they're using right now, so they don't have to be concerned. But going forward, they will be involved, Madam Speaker, as we discuss these. Because when it comes to public funds and financing, Madam Speaker, we all have to be on the same page. Prudent management of the people's money, Madam Speaker, because only 3 ways you're going to get funds, Madam Speaker. Well, 4 ways now with the .ai, Madam Speaker, .ai domain registration. We have, more than was budgeted for, and that's a good thing. And we do know that this has to be utilized appropriately, Madam Speaker. But otherwise, it is taxes, it's grants, and it's foreign direct investment. And we know that right now, in terms of grants, that well has dried up, Madam Speaker. Because when we were eligible for the European Development Fund, EDF, that is gone with Brexit. And sometimes funding is promised and then it's taken away, Madam Speaker. But we press on because, as I said to the New York Times in an interview, that sometimes God smiles down on us, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to touch on what was raised about the lack of consultation, not meeting with the staff. Madam Speaker, I met with different groups of health authority staff back in 2020 and 2021. And at that time, because we had campaigned about bringing the health authority back into the Ministry of Health, I was asked about that, Madam Speaker. And I stated and continue to state that it was going to happen. When, I couldn't say, because at that time we were during COVID. But I met with the support staff, I met with the nurses, I met with the doctors, all separately. I met with administrative staff. I attended Health Authority of Anguilla staff meetings at the Anguilla Football Association conference room. Up until even in 2023, Madam Speaker. I met with the Health Authority staff on March the 8th, 2024. And then I also met with the Anguilla Nurses Association and other nurses on the 22nd of March at the Sir Optimus Center. Also, Madam Speaker, I've been in meetings where the CEO was present, including in December of 2023, and in the Attorney General's chambers when we were reviewing the draft bill, Madam Speaker. I would have assumed that the information there would then have been translated to the staff. But here we are, Madam Speaker, and I've apologized if there's a perception of lack of communication with the staff. We intend to do better, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's been stakeholder consultations. As you've heard me say, that the chairman of the Health Service Reform Board met with the private doctors, met with the supervisors, met with the staff, other members of the Service Reform Board and the subcommittees have met with other members of the public to get their feedback, Madam Speaker. So we may not have sat in the gallery of the House like we do for most of our public consultations, but we've been on radio, we've been on social media, we've been in the hospital. Madam Speaker, if anyone had concerns about the transition, they would have talked about it. I've met persons that I've gone around and they've talked about it. Madam Speaker, the only persons that told me that they were against this was the former member for Valley North and one or two others, Madam Speaker, who would have been related to persons who were involved in the initial transition of the Department of Health to the Health Authority of Anguilla. So I would think, given that there hasn't been this vocal opposition that we hear about, Madam Speaker, I think that that people understand that this is a necessary move to not only ensure that the health care of the people of Anguilla is catered for, but that it will be better, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's concern that the Health Authority of Anguilla continues to require subventions. Now, I know that you'll always need subventions for health care. Different countries, you know, the US, 22% of their budget is for health care. In the UK, over 40% is committed to health care and the National Health Fund, the National Health Service. But, Madam Speaker, if the government of Anguilla, which basically means the people of Anguilla, the taxpayers of Anguilla, are paying for health care, over 70%, then I think that the public service, which has great oversight, where the Minister of Health can have more accountability and the ability to give directives, that's how it should be managed, Madam Speaker. The Health Authority also could not account for all the funds that they were given. And Madam Speaker, you heard the Single Island White member talk about that there's over $17 million in arrears, which means they also can't collect what is owed. Now, the goal is to make sure that we have a better health care service, and that is what I'm committing to, Madam Speaker. Do we have a plan? There is a plan, Madam Speaker. But not every plan has to be laid out. This will be seen as we go along, Madam Speaker. You know, as I said earlier, we intend to, have more staff, medical and nursing, more equipment, and provide more services. And that's the plan as we go along, Madam Speaker. I don't want to stay here all day, Madam Speaker. We've heard a lot. I just want to say that sometimes it's easier, Madam Speaker, to just sit down and stay with the status quo, and you get less criticism. But then, Madam Speaker, when you realize that you're not doing what is right for the people of Anguilla, when they went into the hot sun and stood in line and voted for you, and they had the inconvenience, Madam Speaker, we stand in the gap for them, and we have to make sure that during this time that they have given us this opportunity, that we do what is right, Madam Speaker. And it is right for the Health Authority to be transitioned into the Department of Health Services. Madam Speaker, if we look at the bill is specific to address some of the concerns that persons have. One of the concerns, Madam Speaker, was that the public, to get staff, recruitment, that you have to go through the Public Service Commission. Section 7, Madam Speaker, talks about that the Health Commissioner has the ability to hire persons without going through the PSC when there are emergencies, when you need to fill in a spot. And that is because we understand what healthcare and the needs are, Madam Speaker. And certainly when it is necessary, because somebody's on sick leave and you need to get somebody quickly, without going through all the bureaucracy, Madam Speaker, the Health Commissioner can, with consulting with the Permanent Secretary, can hire someone up to a period of 6 months, and then a contract can be given, which would then go through the normal process, Madam Speaker. This is important, Madam Speaker. We know that persons want to access their medical records, Madam Speaker. This has to be done in a manner where those persons know that their medical records are true representations of what the issues are. And so if they have concerns about what's in the record, they can question it, and then that has to be considered, Madam Speaker. They also know that if there are any issues, that they can report to an appeals committee, Madam Speaker. And so also if staff have concerns and they go through their usual processes through their supervisor, etc., and they don't feel they had satisfaction in how things are dealt with, they can go to the appeals committee, Madam Speaker. So the bill caters for some of the concerns that we heard when dealing and discussing with staff. These are all included in the pathways that were set up and discussed and recommended by the Health Service Reform Board. And so that's what's in the report, Madam Speaker. It outlines how to get from the Health Authority to the Department of Health Services. And sometimes, Madam Speaker, those types of reports don't have to be made public because they're guiding a specific, direction. And Madam Speaker, the people will see that this is the way to go. So, Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for your patience. I want to thank the members for their time and for the input, and certainly want to thank the Health Service Reform Board. I want to thank the staff of the Health Authority of Anguilla for the service that they have provided to the people of Anguilla for the past 20 years or more, because some of them were there prior to 2004, Madam Speaker. I want to thank them for their service, and I know that becoming public officers, that we will ensure that their interests are looked after and that they continue to have a health service delivery system that works for them and for the people of Anguilla. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Member, and thanks to all members for their contributions. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled Department of Health Services Act 2024 be now read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
An act to provide for the dissolution of the statutory body called the Health Authority of Anguilla, to integrate personnel of the authority into the public service, and to vest all personal and real assets and interests of the Health Authority into the Crown, and replace it with the Department of Health Services under the Ministry of Health in the government, while also continuing to provide for the same efficient administration of healthcare services that existed under the authority, and to provide for other incidental and connected matters.
Under Rule 45 of the House of Assembly Rules of Procedures 2021, the bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole Assembly to be considered clause by clause. Assembly in committee.
Clauses 1 through 40.
Under appeals, that's section 26. A, 1A, I think.
Madam Chair, I move that in section 26, 1A, where it says, a health professional who's aggrieved by a decision of a regarding his or her application for privileges, that we remove the words of a.
Madam Chair, I second.
Thank you, members. So I put the question that section 26, 1A be amended to remove the words in the first line of a, so that the sentence reads, a health professional who is aggrieved by a decision regarding his or her application be amended as suggested. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. I put the question that clauses 1 to 40 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it.
The title and the enacting clause.
I put the question that the title and the enacting clause do stand part of the bill. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume its sitting. May I report?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to report that the bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Department of Health Services Act 2024, has passed through committee with amendments and is ready for its third reading.
A bill for Department of Health Services Act 2024, third reading.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Department of Health Services Act 2024 be read a third time and passed.
Madam Speaker, I raise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Department of Health Services Act 2024 be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
An act to provide for the dissolution of the statutory body called the Health Authority of Anguilla, to integrate personnel of the authority into the Anguilla Public Service, and to vest all personal and real assets and interests of the Health Authority into the Crown and place it with the Department of Health Services under the Ministry of Health in the government, while also continuing to provide for the same efficient administration of healthcare services that existed under the authority, and to provide for other incidental and connected matters.
Bill read a third time and passed.
A bill for Department of Water Services Act 2024, second reading.
The
Ma-
member for Road South is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the bill shortly entitled A Bill for the Department of Water Services Act 2024 be read a second time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
You may explain the merits and principles of this bill.
Madam Speaker, I hope that this is not as contentious, Madam Speaker. But if I may give a few of the objects and reasons. The purpose of this bill for the Department of Water Services Act is to transfer the management and operation of pipe water system into statutory corporation called the Water Corporation of Anguilla to the Department of Water Services, the government department housed under the ministry responsible for water works. Madam Speaker, we have a whole list of objects and reasons that we have been furnished to all members of the House, but as I said, I don't think that this will be contentious, so
You speak to the objections and reasons to educate the public, member.
should I go through all of them?
Please.
Okay. Part 1 sets out the definitions used in the bill. Part 2, comprising of Section 2 to 5, deals with the dissolution of the Water Corporation and transfers the regulation, distribution, and supply of water to the Department of Water Services, the Government of Anguilla Department, housed under the ministry responsible for water works. Section 3 provides for the vesting in the ministry of all reliefs, easements, and other rights in relation to water on land that are held by the corporation. Section 4 provides that it is an offense for anyone other than the department to supply water by pipe to the public. Section 5 outlines the general powers and functions of the chief water engineer under the Act. Parts 3 and 4, comprising of Sections 6 to 14, deals with the various rights and responsibilities of the department. Sections 6 and 7 deal with the department's right of entry into private roads and private land. Sections 8 and 9 with the acquisition of reliefs in private roads and exercise of rights under those reliefs. Section 10 and 11 deal with the acquisition of reliefs in private lands and the exercise of rights under those reliefs. Section 12 provides for a remedy for the situation that occur when waterworks on a private road or land have a substantial adverse effect to the value of utility of the land. Section 13 provides that the department is not liable to pay compensation for damage caused by its removal of a thing willfully or maliciously placed, or caused to be placed by a person so as to obstruct, hinder, or interfere with the exercise by the department of its rights or powers. Section 14 provides for immunity of service connections and other water works from seizure and other procedures that affect the owner of land on which those connections or waterworks are located. Part 5 comprises of Sections 15 to 25, deals with the supply of water service from the water mains of the department to the premises of the customers. Part 6, a number of offense provisions follow. And you want me to read all of them as well too, Madam Speaker? Okay. Section 26, illegal connections and works related to illegal connections. Section 27, unlawful abstraction or consumption of unlawfully abstracted water. Section 28, willful contamination, example of potable water supply. Section 29, damage to water meters, and illegal reconnection of water service. Section 30, disconnecting, damaging, etc. of the water works. Section 31, obstruction, etc. of the chief water engineer or any person authorized by him. Section 32, prohibitions respecting water from standpipes. Part 7 deals with regulation, citation, commencement, savings, repeal, and transitional provisions. Section 33 gives the power to the Executive Council to make regulations. Section 34 deals with the citation and commencement of the Act. Section 35 deals with the savings of the regulations. Section 36 repeals the Water Corporation of Anguilla Act. A number of transitional provisions follow. Section 37 provides that the Executive Council is given the power to make regulations on transitional matters. Section 38 deals with employees of the corporation. This section provides that a person who is employed by the corporation immediately before the commencement of this act shall be deemed to be a public officer within the meaning of Section 73 of the Anguilla Constitution Order 1982. Section 39 provides that a rate for water service and terms and conditions of the service and charges imposed by the corporation immediately before coming into the force of this act, and the interest rate charged and the later accounts immediately before coming into force of this act remain in force until changed by the Department of Water Services. The department is a successor to the rights of the corporation, Section 39(2). Agreements and arrangements entered into by the corporation before the act comes into force are grandfathered in Section 39(4). Section 41A deals with the transfer of a leasehold interest in the land occupied by the Water Corporation to the department. Section 41B deals with the vesting in the government the personal property of the Water Corporation associated with the operations of the corporation. Section 41C, the assignment of certain contracts to the corporation to the government of Anguilla are provided for, and Section 42 provides for the preparation of an inventory of the personal property and contracts above mentioned in Section 39. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member. I now invite debate on the merits and principles of this bill, Department of Water Services Act 2024. The floor is open for contributions. The member for Valley South is recognized.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. I don't intend to be on my feet very long, but I do want to generally offer my support to this Department of Water Services bill. I do want to say, Madam Speaker, that the government of Anguilla is very well aware of the extremely hard-working members of the Water Corporation who work tirelessly to deal with some of the long-standing issues in relation to the water network in Anguilla. And they have done an exemplary job at managing the broken water network as best as they possibly can. That being said, Madam Speaker, we're also very well aware that for a number of years, members of the Water Corporation, persons who would have been working very tirelessly to ensure that this public good, which is water, has been provided, have been working for less than minimum wage to a large extent. And as part of the reforms of the Honorable Member, Single Island White Electoral Member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, in his capacity as the Minister of Home Affairs, a number of the reforms that this administration have put into place by virtue of the institution of a minimum wage really extended to the payment of public workers who have been on government's payroll making less than minimum wage for a very long period of time. And now with this transition, the members of the Water Corporation, now members of the Department of Water Services, will see relevant increases in their pay scale to ensure that the government of Anguilla is again ensuring that persons are compensated fairly, which we would have set out also in the changes requisite to the Department of Health Services Act. So I do want to commend the minister for that, and the substantive minister who is going to be responsible for the Department of Water for ensuring that those things were addressed and will be addressed going forward in relation to the provision of water services. Madam Speaker, there is, as the minister would have said on many occasions, the possibility of water being a self-sufficient body in terms of its revenue and expenditures. And in the past, there would have been circumstances where water would have had its revenue and its expenditure would have been balanced. However, Madam Speaker, we know very, well, it would have been ventilated from since 2021 after we would have made the discovery that the Water Corporation would have broken their previous contract provision for their desalination plant for PPP with the company Seven Seas, which would have escalated the costs related to the provision of water in Anguilla quite substantially. Now, as it relates to the two major expenses for the Water Corporation, which would have been that contract for Seven Seas and the utilities for the Water Corporation, we would have seen significant difficulty on the part of the Water Corporation, not only by its inability to cover its expenditure because of those very high expenditure items. In fact, its personal emoluments was much less than those big ticket items of the Seven Seas contracts and water. So those two things that were critically important for the provision of water services far outweighed and exceeded personal emoluments and administrative costs for the Water Corporation of Anguilla. And that was a significant challenge. Now, as you would have seen in the Government of Anguilla's medium-term economic and fiscal plan, that we continue to set aside monies specific for the redevelopment of the water infrastructure within Anguilla. In total, Madam Speaker, I know this is a rough figure, but I just for the roundness of the public record, we do know that this will cost in excess of $50 million. Is that correct, Minister? The redevelopment of the water infrastructure. The redevelopment of the water infrastructure in excess of $50 million. I do bring that up because I have heard persons ask why we didn't take the monies for the Lansombo Cultural Center and redevelop the water infrastructure instead. So I just wanted to put in perspective the cost of redeveloping the water infrastructure on island. But that being said, the government of Anguilla has made commitments in relation to resolving those issues, knowing that 80% of the water produced by the Water Corporation of Anguilla does not make it to households in Anguilla. It remains in the ground by virtue of leakages in the pipes. So, Madam Speaker, essentially the Water Corporation would have moved from a place where it would not have needed to be subvented by the government of Anguilla to a place where it needed to be subvented by the taxpayers of Anguilla. That was the position of the Water Corporation. And so either way you put it, which we would have indicated earlier in relation to the Department of Health Services, you would have heard when there would have been instances where the Health Authority of Anguilla would not have been able to to produce a balanced budget. That would have been a similar circumstance with the Water Corporation of Anguilla, whereas a statutory body was not able to produce a balanced budget as a result of the extortionate costs, its inability to provide services and to bring on more clientele because of the state of the water infrastructure. And so it is, and it has become very apparent and important, Madam Speaker, for the proper management of the department or the Water Corporation, soon to be the Department of Water, that the minister is able to exercise proper oversight over the functioning and management of this body to ensure going forward not only more convenient lines like 24/7 water are actually held true, but also that we are able to assess the viability of these institutions, the feasibility of these institutions, and where we find that they are not holding strain in relation to their viability or their, the viability, that we can address them comprehensively. Madam Speaker, as you would have noted from my presentation before, I would have referred to the particular issue in relation to lack of accounting in relation to public funds that are provided to the health authority. In the Water Corporation case, this would have been an instance where a PPP would have been entered into with lack of oversight through the proper channels that would have been required under the FAAA Act. So as a result, they would have increased government's contingent liability, which is something I would have referred to already. And that contingent liability is something that the government of Anguilla still has to factor into its budgeting processes. And so with the Water Corporation becoming the Water Department of Anguilla, we have a better ability to oversee the body, a better ability to oversee its expenditures, its costs, etc., and to reform the way that water is produced under the Minister of Infrastructure. And with that said, Madam Speaker, I would just like to give my general support to this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. The days are already well spent, and my honorable colleague would have said much of what I would have wanted to say, Madam Speaker, but I just want to say, Madam Speaker, I support this bill. I said earlier, Madam Speaker, that the situation with our statutory bodies in Anguilla has not been a very happy one. It has not been a very successful one, Madam Speaker, and that's a cause for regret. And I fully support the reintegration of water into the government of Anguilla. Madam Speaker, earlier I would have commended the staff, nurses, and doctors of the health authority. I want to do such a similar thing for the workers of the Water Corporation as well. Because for some reason, Madam Speaker, my area from my house to the valley seems to be a very popular area for leakages, and often I see the guys that are there with their machines. And Madam Speaker, for a long time, they were driving and operating some very ancient machinery, Madam Speaker. And I was happy that this administration was able to provide them with some new vehicles. So, Madam Speaker, water is an essential part of life, Madam Speaker. And I know with the initiatives being undertaken by our Minister of Natural Resources to encourage more backyard farmers. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, just a few days ago, she would have had a drive where persons were able to get 10 buckets of dirt, Madam Speaker. And I was able to, well, my wife is more the backyard farmer in the family, you know, and we really need water, Madam Speaker, to be able to ensure that our backyard projects are growing. Madam Speaker, I feel a little sense of pride that some months ago I was able to grow some tremendous sized pumpkins, and I would have posed a bit on Facebook with them, and those pumpkins were really good. So the whole concept of backyard farming is gathering root, and of course that depends a lot upon a regular supply of water. And I really want to commend the staff of the Water Department for operating under very trying circumstances over all of this period of time, and look forward with the reintegration that they will first of all get better wages. The minimum wage was a help, but we look forward to seeing their lives improve as time goes on. So, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I take my seat. Madam Speaker, I also have to leave urgently as well, so I crave your indulgence.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Any other contributions to this bill? Since there are no other contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as you know, I am usually very brief, as indicated with my earlier presentation. On the reintegration of health back into the health authority back into central government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today is a great day in the history of Anguilla. I was part of the election campaign. You too, Madam Speaker. In 2009, when we promised that we would reintegrate the health authority back into central government, Madam Speaker, because too many people were complaining about the delivery of health services, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, on coming to office in 2010, a committee was put together, Madam Speaker. It was chaired by the gentleman by the name of Perrin Bradley, Madam Speaker. I know a lot of people may not be familiar with that name, Madam Speaker. But his name is actually Perrin Ainsworth Bradley, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, other members included Dr. Lowell Hughes, a genius in Anguilla's medical field, Madam Speaker, Barney Richardson Lake, and others. And they submitted a report, Madam Speaker, a dismal report about health authority in Anguilla, Madam Speaker. Nothing to do with the staff. Staff are great staff, and historically have been great staff at the hospital. Because it was in 1927, Madam Speaker, when the cottage hospital was built. 1927, Madam Speaker. And so we've had health under the government of Anguilla for almost 100 years, Madam Speaker. And in 2004, because of the lack of will, laziness, and the fact that the Anguilla United Front have historically divested of their responsibilities to ensure that their political people get positions on boards, divested of a number of these organizations into statutory bodies, Madam Speaker, whether it be the Water Corporation, the Health Authority, the Anguilla Air and Seaports Authority, and the list goes on, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, when I hear the Honorable Member for Valley North, Madam Speaker, saying that stats bodies were put in place for greater efficiency, Madam Speaker, knowing full well that she worked in central government and she worked in a statutory body, Madam Speaker. And it's obvious that that is not the case, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, the member went on to say that we are giving the governor more power and control. We are giving the governor more power and control by taking statutory bodies and bringing them back into central government. And Madam Speaker, the member for Valley North said, and I quote, "The public service is a responsibility of the governor. Is that we are actually giving the governor, and by extension the British government, more power and control over one of our statutory bodies? And if that is the intention, Madam Speaker, then sure, absolutely, no problem, absolutely. The civil service, Madam Speaker," and I'm quoting from the member for Valley North, "is a responsibility of the deputy governor. And when you bring 200 plus employees back under the public service, ultimately they are answerable to the permanent secretary. Deputy governor, Madam Speaker, that is the structure that exists. Yes, it is true that the minister is able to offer directives, Madam Speaker, but we know, Madam Speaker, from experience, that there are a number of ministers who have complained about working with particular permanent secretaries that don't carry out their directives. Not just this administration, meaning the APM administration, Madam Speaker, but other administrations have complained about the same, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, inferring that this administration have been complaining about their permanent secretaries. And Madam Speaker, I want to place on record that at no time have you ever heard me complain about Permanent Secretary Karim Hodge. At no time have I heard the Honorable Premier complain about Permanent Secretary Kathleen Rogers. At no time have I heard the member for Valley South complain about her Permanent Secretary, Madam Speaker. At no time have I heard Ken Hodge, the single island wide member, Madam Speaker, Minister of Home Affairs, complain about his Permanent Secretary, Madam Speaker. And at no time have I heard the single island wide member, Ms. Quincy Gomes-Marie, complain of her Permanent Secretary. And even the Deputy Governor, who has a Permanent Secretary, Madam Speaker, I haven't heard him complaining about his Permanent Secretary. So I beg to differ that this administration have been complaining about the Permanent Secretaries. Because this administration, the ministers of this administration, Madam Speaker, manages their ministries, Madam Speaker. They say that we are rookies and we didn't have the experience to lead, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, we're demonstrating time and time again that we have that ability to lead, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, we came into office on the 1st of July, 2020, Madam Speaker. Before coming to the office, we heard that we were in the best place, Madam Speaker. We heard that we had 24-hour water, Madam Speaker. We heard that water was was a great operation, making profits and providing water across the length and breadth of this country, Madam Speaker. We heard it was in a good position. And when we came to office, Madam Speaker, because we saw the complaints from the people on social media and otherwise, I was called by several people to see the state of their water, more wind and water, Madam Speaker. It didn't happen to me, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, when we asked about the position of water, we came to the realization that water had owed Anglic $11 million, Madam Speaker. That is when we came into office. Thank God for Harold Ruan, Madam Speaker. Because if Harold Ruan was like Patrick Martin Barrow, nobody in Anguilla would have gotten water, Madam Speaker. Because Harold never once tried to cut the electricity from water. But Patrick Martin Barrow, Madam Speaker, not only did he cut the electricity for water, Madam Speaker, he also enacted an illegal act, an unlawful act, even though he was told it was illegal and unlawful, in that of load shedding, Madam Speaker. And under him, the electricity surcharge, fuel surcharge, escalated exponentially, even though we begged and plead, Madam Speaker. And the same Patrick Martin Barrow was the chairman. He said that we were giving him directives. We weren't giving him any directives. But he was acting as if he was Lord and God of the board of directors of Anglic without consulting with his fellow members. Madam Speaker, but that's for another day, Madam Speaker. We'll talk about that in the contracts that he gave without consulting the rest of the members, and they didn't even see the contract until the board was changed, Madam Speaker. But anyway, Madam Speaker, also, up in Crocus Hill, we heard the Anguilla United Front brag about this new tank, and they have all of these tanks. To date, one of those tanks had never seen a drop of water, Madam Speaker. Sitting on Crocus Hill, big old tank, empty. Nothing hooked up to that tank. And even the existing tanks, you can't fill them with water, because if you fill them with water, you know what happens? Because water is gravity fed. And we have a destroyed water network, Madam Speaker. It explodes all over the place, the leaks. And you know how those leaks started, Madam Speaker? There was a water engineer by the name of Romel Hughes, Madam Speaker. My first cousin, so I can speak about him. My first cousin. His father and my father are brothers. He was a water engineer. He was laying the pipe, Madam Speaker. And I was surprised because he used to know how to lay pipe. But he was laying the pipe in a wrong manner, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, when he laid those pipes, in the haste, they threw the rubble onto those pipes, Madam Speaker, and pinhole. The reports show that pinholes, holes were created by the rocks falling on those pipes. They did not put them in a soft bed like how these guys are doing it under this capable water engineer that we have, Miss Clifton, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, when the water started to go through those pipes, leaks erupted everywhere, Madam Speaker. Everywhere. And so over 80% of the water is leaking into the ground, Madam Speaker. But what can you do? There are people who still rely on water, Madam Speaker, pipe water. So you have to keep it, Madam Speaker. But for all intents and purposes, water is insolvent. The government of Anguilla gets the blame and got the blame left, right, and center. And you hear the member for Valley North talking about how the political directorate can give directives to the boards so they don't need to reintegrate, Madam Speaker. And at the same time, running with a gentleman who said that he fell out with the government because they tried to give directives. I've seen a letter from a chairman of a statutory body to a leader of government business saying you may be the minister, but if you try to interfere, we're taking you to court. And just recently, Madam Speaker, the government of Anguilla had to jump in to help bail out water in terms of a case that was brought against them for outstanding electricity bills, historic outstanding electricity bills, Madam Speaker. Water is not even producing enough revenue because of all the losses to pay for the production of water. For all intents and services, Madam Speaker, water is insolvent. So when you have these issues, when you have a statutory body where there's $4 to $6 million that are missing, I shouldn't say missing. Let me go back and refer to the Honorable Victor Franklin Banks' words. It's not money missing, it's money unaccounted for. So when you go to $4 to $6 million a year for the past 20 years of monies that are unaccounted for, when you have a statutory body where over 80% of the water goes into the ground, can't pay its electricity bills, can't pay for the production of water, litigation and lawyers coming left, right, and center for their money and they can't pay and can barely pay their staff who are on the lowest end of the salary scale in Anguilla, Madam Speaker. And people are calling the minister. What's going on with the water in Blowing Point? What's going on with the water in West End? What's going on with the water in Island Harbor? And even in Sandy Ground, we have gravity. What's going on with the water in Sandy Ground? And I'm going to make the excuse that it's a statutory body and I can't do anything about it. We, the Anguilla Progressive Movement, is going to say that we can't do anything about it. Do you hear how much criticism is levied against this administration and the Honorable Premier about health? Yet, you can't do anything about it because it's a statutory body. So if you're going to get the blame, then you must have the authority to do something about it, Madam Speaker. And so, we are not going to lay down and not act, Madam Speaker. We are going to act, Madam Speaker. And they ask us, what's the rush? They ask us, what's the rush? Madam Speaker, just today, I had occasion to look at the Nevis Island News, Madam Speaker, and they are going to be celebrating their carnival in August of this year. And lo and behold, like many countries around the Caribbean following the Anguilla Progressive Movement's lead, Nevis is demolishing today their cultural center with the hope of rebuilding it for the carnival in August, Madam Speaker. But the members of the opposition criticized us and criticized a member for Valley South for demolishing the old Lancer Bowl Cultural Center to rebuild in time for carnival. It can't be done. They say it can't be done. And their key advisor, Mr. Eddie Kelly, even went on radio and said it must go through procurement because the money is in the treasury. If Mr. Kelly was telling the truth, which he really does, Madam Speaker, which he really does, he would have known, if he was telling the truth, he would have had to go through procurement. But we know how the Procurement Act is. We know how it is, Madam Speaker. And the reason why they were insisting on procurement, even though they know that procurement, in this case, was not necessary, is because they want the minister to look bad. They want the government to look bad, because when the minister stood up last August and she said this will be the last time we will be celebrating our emancipation, our summer festival in this facility. This will be the last time. They laughed. As a matter of fact, all the way in London, they wanted to reprimand the minister. Reprimand the minister? But the minister is more well known in England than even those who tried to reprimand her. Who knows who he is, Mr. FCDO? But Miss Universe Great Britain, the first black Miss Universe Great Britain, is a lady by the name of the Honorable Deanne Kentish Rogers, who have been representing Anguilla from her youth on up in track, in other fields of expertise, Madam Speaker. So she's more than qualified to be the Minister of Sports, to be the Minister of Culture, Madam Speaker. And when she stood up and said this will be the last time, and guess what? They say it was impossible, but now they say it's going so fast it's going to fall. What's the rush, Madam Speaker? What's the rush? Madam Speaker, and here is the rush, because change can't wait, Madam Speaker. What's the rush? We rushed to ensure that we amend the Thirteenth legislation that was ridiculous, Madam Speaker. We rushed to change the hair policy, Madam Speaker, because it discriminated against our people of African descent. We rushed to implement Senior Shield, Madam Speaker, that gives over 1,000 Anguillians over the age of 70 free comprehensive health care at all government-owned healthcare facilities, Madam Speaker. And now, even more so, because the health authority is no more and will now be the Department of Health Services in the government of Anguilla. Ministers who are not afraid to work, Madam Speaker. And so we rushed to create Anguilla's first national green space, Madam Speaker. And they asked us what to rush. That's what they do. What's the rush? They came up with a 15-point plan in 2015, and they didn't even get to number 1 yet. But they're complaining and saying that we are pushing too much, doing too much. What's the rush to implement the Green Belt program, Madam Speaker? And Blue Belt, Madam Speaker, and to have fish stock assessments and to have a fisheries board, Madam Speaker, and a fish processing plant that the minister's working hard on, Madam Speaker. What's the rush to provide our farmers, Madam Speaker, with shade houses and water tanks, Madam Speaker, giving them 2,000 gallons of water up front? You see how farming, fisheries, and natural resources took off when a hard-working minister took over, Madam Speaker. You got to separate the wheat from the thorns, Madam Speaker. Now you say, Madam Speaker, they ask us what's the rush. What is the rush to develop the Blowing Point Ferry Terminal, Madam Speaker, and the taxi stand, and develop paid parking in Blowing Point? What's the rush? Why are you rushing? What's the rush to get out the shift system that my daughter entered into and graduated out of? $36 million. $36 million invested because it was under finance, Madam Speaker. What's the rush? What's the rush to get a George Hill bypass, Madam Speaker? What are you doing George Hill bypass when you could do the Valley Main Road? That's what they said. So you know what? We rushed to do the Valley Main Road, Madam Speaker. What was the rush? To enact the enabling works that gave us a parallel taxiway, additional apron space in a new parking lot at the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport, Madam Speaker. What's the rush to provide lunch to our children, Madam Speaker, in the lunch program? Why are you rushing that? We are not yet finished because there are still schools. Because they didn't have the physical capacity, Madam Speaker. And we're going to fix that, Madam Speaker. We're not yet done. Madam Speaker, they asked what the rush to implement a minimum wage. We have never in the history of Anguilla had a minimum wage, Madam Speaker. Never, ever. Under the Anguilla United Front, they brought in workers out of India and China, Madam Speaker, some even having tuberculosis. We could have had a disaster in this country. Put them down in what they call man camps, Madam Speaker, feeding them cabbage soup, paying them $250 a month, Madam Speaker. Those days are over. We have a construction boom in Anguilla, the likes we have never seen, in not one man camp. And you know what they say? People can't eat concrete. But as my good friend Claude Gums would say, as concrete pours, a country grows. And Madam Speaker, when I go down to the Lanson Bowl Cultural Center, when I go to the airport, when I go to Shoal Bay, when I go to Island Harbor, when I go across this island, all the bushes in Carl's Bottom and so forth, Madam Speaker, you know who I see pouring concrete and laying blocks? Not robots, you know. People. Men and women. Men and women in construction, Madam Speaker. Hundreds of people. So tell me that is not helping our economy, Madam Speaker? And Madam Speaker, it was a member for Sandy Hill who spoke on the first year anniversary of this administration. And she said the genius of the Anguilla United Front and of the leader of the Anguilla United Front was that they had a definitive agreement for a marina and standing ground that nobody knew about. Because when the Anguilla program projects are up in construction to keep the economy going, then you will have the definitive agreement in standing ground, developing a marina and standing ground so that you could continue to keep the construction sector going because it's a driving factor in Anguilla's economy. But today we have more construction going on in this country, so much so that Remy can't even keep up with the cement, Madam Speaker, than ever before. And people can't eat concrete, as if people are not rodding the concrete off, plastering the buildings, laying the blocks, laying the pipe, putting in the electrical ductwork, Madam Speaker. Human beings, not robots. So what's the rush? They ask us what's the rush. They keep asking what's the rush to get these things done, Madam Speaker. What's the rush to remove taxes and import duties on prescription medications, Madam Speaker? For decades, and a decade is 10 years, the Webster's Dictionary that the Webster's family wrote, Madam Speaker, said that 10 years constitutes a decade. And for decades, plural, we have been trying to remove duties. I know the Anguilla United Front tried. I know the Anguilla United Movement tried. But guess what? This administration got it done. So your insulin and all your prescription medications now, no duties, no GST, no taxes on it, Madam Speaker. We rush to do it, and they ask, what's the rush? And I say again, the rush is because change couldn't wait, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they ask what's the rush on electricity credits? You give electricity credits? And you do it again? And you do it again? And Madam Speaker, between one electricity credit and the next electricity credit, almost 200 new meters, Madam Speaker. Where did they come from? New homes, Madam Speaker. New homes coming on stream, Madam Speaker. Growth, investment, new homes, private homes, Madam Speaker. Young people building homes. We went from a country that had 1 million marches to a country with brand new Shanghangs and all sorts of brand new cars on our roads today, madam. And I see them. I peep through the window every single day and I see people coming in to license their vehicles, Madam Speaker. They ask us what's the rush to implement vanity plates, Madam Speaker. It's there. I was surprised that a single well-and-white member, Mr. Vanderpool, didn't come down to get his number plate because I thought he would have tried to be the first. But be that as it may, he's not the first. But it's there. What's the rush to build the Villiers Vanderpool Primary School, Madam Speaker? In technical wing, a school they wanted to shut down, Madam Speaker, but they couldn't shut it down. And Madam Speaker, do you know that the greatest premier in Anguilla's history that's his alma mater? Do you know the greatest ear, throws, and nose doctor? That's his alma mater. Do you know, Madam Speaker, that the first and only female speaker in the Anguilla House of Assembly, that's her alma mater? But they wanted to shut it down, but guess what? The Honorable Premier, Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster, Madam Speaker. He ain't got a bad middle name like Mr. Bradley, because they even call him Lorenzo most times. I withdraw me, Mr. Bradley, before you kick me out of South Hill. But Madam Speaker, he fought to ensure that that school is redeveloped and it's moving nicely along. The hard work of Romney, Arshad, and Beck, Madam Speaker, doing a tremendous job over there, Madam Speaker. Rushing to get it done. Madam Speaker, the road that leads from George Hill to the Jeremiah Gums Highway, we call it Christabel Road, and the Merchants Market Road, and the road in the North Side, and the Rumcan Road, and the Spring Pat Road, Madam Speaker. What was the rush to get them done? Done, Madam Speaker. So what's the rush? Wasting time and money. Drive on those roads, Madam Speaker. I drive on them, I check them out all the time. 2 years later, less potholes, Madam Speaker. And you know, Madam Speaker, there's going to come a time very soon that we will have to resurface all of the main roads in Anguilla. Every time there's a rain, Madam Speaker, you see the potholes popping up. Those roads have come to the end of their natural life. And you know, in the next term, Madam Speaker, that starts very soon, we will have an aggressive road program across this island, not only to address our dirt roads, but also to address our main spine roads, Madam Speaker. We have to rush to do that. We're not worried about them when they ask us what's the rush, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, they're asking us what's the rush and the importance of having a hatchery in Anguilla, Madam Speaker, and an abattoir, Madam Speaker. We are moving on up with the times, Madam Speaker. Keep on asking us what's the rush. Madam Speaker, what's the rush to transition from the new pier in Santa Ground, Madam Speaker, to ensure that that is operational, Madam Speaker? Without a plan, they did it, you know. But we have to fix it. And we're rushing to fix it. And before the end of this month, Madam Speaker, we only have a few days, but before the end of this month, it'll be done, Madam Speaker. Operationalize, Madam Speaker, and decommission the old pier, Madam Speaker, before the end of this month, March of 2024, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, What was the rush to have solar street lighting all through the valley? The Airport Road, the Calvin Washington Lake Road, the Valley Main Road, Madam Speaker. Solar street lighting looks so beautiful. You drive through there in the night and you feel so good. What's the rush to put these benches that was contributed by the high school, the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School, along the breadth of the road? You see people indulging and engaging in those benches and sitting at those benches, Madam Speaker. What was the rush to get the People's Market upgraded and to have the restrooms upgraded? Thank you to Maliohana Hotel for doing that just this year. And thank you to the Honorable Merrick Richardson and Quincy Gomes Marie for working so diligently on that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, what's the rush to have the Resembit program, Madam Speaker, and to transition Anguilla into renewable energy and providing duty-free for all hybrid and electric vehicles, Madam Speaker? What's the rush to embark on a program of CCTV across this island, Madam Speaker? They're asking us, what's the rush? Why are you doing these things? What's the rush to develop an indoor facility in Blowing Point? Madam Speaker, we got a lot more coming where that is concerned. They're asking us, what's the rush? Can you believe it? What's the rush? What's the rush to enact tougher gun laws? We heard former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Rudolph Proctor, said that under the Anguilla United Front, he made these recommendations well over a decade ago. And now they're asking us, what's the rush? How can you ask us what's the rush, Madam Speaker? To have Project Inspire and have a transition of how we educate our children, Madam Speaker. What's the rush to develop our Players Pavilion, Madam Speaker? We saw post-Hurricane Irma, one Cardigan Connor went to England, say raising monies for the Webster's Park and the Players Pavilion, the development there. Nothing happened. But it's going to happen now. Even though they ask us, what's the rush? Madam Speaker, under the Hubert Hughes, Victor Banks administration, we got .ai, Madam Speaker. And for many years, it lay there languishing. And then the Honorable Premier and the Honorable Quincy Gomes Marie said, you know what? This can be a real pillar in Anguilla's economic takeoff. We have to put some teeth in it. We have to market it. We have to promote it. We have to drive it. And today, it's stayed there for over 20 years, you know. Not doing anything really. But when you have a progressive administration with innovative thinkers, creators, we have to rush to do these things. And do you know what they do? They ask us, they say that we did not have a plan. And yet they come in this house debating against us when we implement the things that we said we would do when we were campaigning. The things that we do when we said we are campaigning now is part of the plan. So how can you say we had no plan when we are implementing the things that we said we would do? Tick them off. Tick them off. We have gone above and beyond what we said we would do, Madam Speaker. And they say we had no plan. They say we didn't have any experience. They say they were ready to lead, but we don't. We don't have no experience in government business. And so, they try to follow the same path in which we are doing. Take a bunch of novices off the street, put them up as candidates, Madam Speaker, thinking because we had qualified, hard-working, innovative people that they could just grab somebody and put them off the street who never hit a stroke in their life, sit down and live on their wife, and those type of things, Madam Speaker, make them as candidates. And they ask us what's the rush. Madam Speaker, I don't need to prolong this any longer, Madam Speaker, but I'll say this. Tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m., under the auspices of the Honorable Premier, we will be breaking ground on a brand new state-of-the-art Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport Terminal, Madam Speaker. They say it was impossible, and we are rushing. And I'll tell you this, Madam Speaker, within a year, you will see all the trucks in Anguilla, all the heavy equipment in Anguilla, making a push east of the Clayton J. Lloyd International Runway with the extension of the runway. That's a guarantee, Madam Speaker. We're rushing to do it because we have so many airlines lined up waiting to come into Anguilla. We have made a commitment that we will get it done, and you will see Anguilla will have the fastest growing economy. It's already one of the fastest growing economies in the Caribbean, but we'll have the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean, Madam Speaker. I have no doubt about it. The amount of investors that knock down the Premier's door, I know, because I attend those meetings too, wanting to invest in Anguilla just because we are fulfilling the promises of the Honorable James Ronald Webster and those of old to develop a commercially viable international airport, Madam Speaker. So tomorrow, all are invited to the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport, Madam Speaker. The old terminal that Jabari Harrigan will sit in a bulldozer once the new terminal is commissioned and be the first to bulldoze it. Just as the Honorable Deanne Kentish Rogers stood in a bulldozer, Madam Speaker, sat in the bulldozer, Madam Speaker, and tore those walls down. And Madam Speaker, while I say that, I want to thank the Lions Club. I want to thank the Anglican Church. I want to thank all those people. I want to thank Gassie Brooks, Galson Brooks, and all those people for over the years who have contributed to the Lansing Bowl Cultural Center, the building that was there before, Madam Speaker. I also want to thank Doggy, Jason Brooks, who for many years have been advocating for a new Lansing Bowl Cultural Center, and his patience and the patience of all the people in South Valley proper, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while we redevelop a new Lansing Bowl Cultural Center, Madam Speaker, because it was one Deanne Kentish Rogers who through sheer tenacity, hard work, Madam Speaker, and a lot of prayers, who's getting it done. And I can tell you this, Madam Speaker, when that Lansing Bowl Cultural Center is completed, it's going to be the most beautiful Lansing Bowl Cultural Center. It's going to be the most beautiful anywhere in the region and efficient. A stage that is 92 feet long, Madam Speaker, 45 feet deep, 5 feet high. They say, look short. I can't jump up on it anymore. We have to climb up some steps, Madam Speaker. Storage space, lots of storage space, Madam Speaker, underneath. 10 dressing rooms, a lounge for our artists, restrooms and bathrooms, Madam Speaker, office spaces. The vision of the Honorable Deanne Kentish Rogers, Madam Speaker, coming to life. Business incubator rooms. Madam Speaker, I told her already she should have an office down there, but she just wanted to make her staff comfortable. So their offices are going to be down there. And on the other side, 24 booths, Madam Speaker, to create economic opportunities for Anguillians, Madam Speaker. You can open year-round. It's going to be year-round. Sunshine Theater. And all of those other persons, the Base Heads Car Club, can have their car show in there. Even Eyes Wide Shut can be in there if they so desire, Madam Speaker. Paved floor so that the ladies can step in style, Madam Speaker, with their high heels on. And don't have to worry about picking up the heels after the show. VIP booths for the Honorable Cora Richardson Hodge and her friends, Madam Speaker. Restaurant. And so much more, Madam Speaker. The vision of the Honorable Deanne Kentish Rogers And you know what they say? What's the rush? And so, because we know that change can't wait, because we know that time does not wait on us, because we know that we are only here for a short time, we are here to do all we can to ensure that Anguilla is a better place, Madam Speaker. And this administration, led by the Honorable Ellis Lorenzo Webster, Madam Speaker, knows what is at stake. And because he knows what is at stake, Madam Speaker, he's ensuring that we ensure that this country is in a better place. So, Madam Speaker, today, again, is a great day. It has been a long day. I was hoping to get up before sunset so I could go and check on Miss Kentish Rogers' progress down at the Lanza Bowl Cultural Center, but I'll still go, Madam Speaker. But on the 1st of April, let's say the 2nd of April, because I don't like that 1st of April date, April's Fools. But on the 2nd of April, the staff, who I met with a lot of enthusiasm, Madam Speaker, when we met, lots of enthusiasm about coming back to government, Madam Speaker, are going to be back in central government. We met with some staff, in particular the nurses of the Anguilla Health Authority, and they too are excited about the prospects going forward. And Madam Speaker, I believe, and I see them laughing out there as if we're lying, Madam Speaker. We met with them, the Honorable Kenneth Hodge, the Honorable Ellis Lorenzo Webster, the Honorable Deanne Kentish Rogers and I, along with technical staff, met with the nurses, Madam Speaker. It was a very good meeting, very respectful meeting, Madam Speaker. I must commend Ms. Niles, Nurse Niles and her team, and all of the nurses, Madam Speaker, who are in attendance, for their questions, for their suggestions, for their participation, for their respect. It was a great meeting. We'll continue to meet with them, Madam Speaker, to see how we can make this as perfect as we can make it. Because it is okay to come in with legislation, you know, but you may have noted that we have come to this house several times with amendments. There may be a need for amendments as we see as we move forward. With their feedback, the nurses and doctors and those persons who are practicing, Madam Speaker, with their feedback, we can make this better. And we can ensure that when Art goes to St. Martin and Billy D chatting stupidness about healthcare in Anguilla, we can say, now we have the power and authority to really do something about it, Madam Speaker. Reject the art. But anyway, Madam Speaker, I just want to welcome and wish everyone a great weekend this weekend, Madam Speaker. This is Holy Week. And not only is this Holy Week, this is Easter week. We had Palm Sunday on Sunday. And the greatest festival is going to be held this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, in Island Harbor. And tell Keith, have my food ready, because he makes the best. I don't want to say what it is, because I know Miss Rogers Webster's at Adventist, the Premier's at Adventist, and I can't say what that is that he makes. But I'll say this. See you all at the Festival del Mar, Madam Speaker. May peace prevail in this beautiful land of ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Department of Water Services Act 2024 be now read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time.
An act to dissolve the statutory structure called the Water Corporation of Anguilla, and consequently to transfer waterworks, wayleaves, and other personal and real assets and interests of the corporation to the government, to regulate the distribution and supply of piped potable water by the Department of Water Services under the ministry responsible for waterworks, and to provide for transitional, incidental, and ancillary matters.
Under Rule 45 of the House of Assembly Rules of Procedure 2021, The bill now stands referred to a committee of the whole assembly to be considered clause by clause. Assembly in committee.
Clauses 1 through 40.
I put the question that clauses 1 through 40 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The title and the enacting clause.
I put the question that the title and the enacting clause do stand part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume its sitting. You may report.
Madam Speaker, I beg to report the bill entitled A Bill for the Department of Water Services Act 2024 has passed through committee and is ready for its third reading. Sorry? Without amendments, Madam Speaker, sorry.
A bill for Department of Water Services Act 2024, third reading.
Sorry, I was distracted, Madam Speaker. Sorry. I beg a bill, Madam Speaker. I beg, to move that a bill entitled A Department for Water Services Act 2024 be read a third time and pass.
Madam Speaker, I raise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Department of Water Services Act 2024 be now read a third time and passed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
An act to dissolve the statutory structure called the Water Corporation of Anguilla, and consequently to transfer waterworks, way leaves, and other personal and real assets and interests of the corporation to the government, to regulate the distribution and supply of piped potable water by the Department of Water Services under the ministry responsible for waterworks, and to provide for transitional, incidental, and ancillary matters.
Bill read a third time and passed.
Private members' bills? None. Private bills? None. Other orders of the day?
The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
I will.
The member for Valley South is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to indicate to this honorable House that this color is yellow only in the context of Valley Primary School support, but lime green in every other context. But generally, Madam Speaker, I wish to encourage the general public. Of course, tomorrow is Primary School Sports Day, and I wish to encourage the public to continue their support of our young people in their sporting endeavors. I also wish to encourage them to be responsible in relation to the statements that they make. I know that it's all in the wider ambit of fun that we get to support our alma maters, but at the end of the day, these are still children, and we still have to show respect for them and respect for the entire process in relation to whoever ends up as the ultimate victor for Sports Day. I might take off my mic soon. But additionally, Madam Speaker, tomorrow also represents a very momentous occasion for Anguilla in general, as we have the groundbreaking ceremony for the Clayton J. Lloyd International Airport's terminal building, which I see as a critical piece in our the government of Anguilla's attempt to restructure, redevelop Anguilla, not only to bolster our tourism and other industries, but also to open up to young people the possibility of careers in aviation specifically. So we look forward, and we're very happy that after decades, we can finally see that this dream is going to be fulfilled. And on a more somber note, Madam Speaker, the Honorable Premier would have mentioned when he began his contribution to the Department of Health Services Act that Anguilla has lost quite a champion in the for health protection, prevention of chronic diseases. Sorry, Madam Speaker. And I've lost a colleague who has been with us in the Ministry of Social Development. My staff have been struggling with the loss of Mr. John Lake, who is a cousin to me. I still can hear him say, "My cousin," as he hops up the steps. And Madam Speaker, it's always difficult to talk about persons who have gone on. And irrespective, I think it's not quite hitting home for a lot of us because Powell was the type of person who, no matter what happened to him, it seemed as though he had 9 lives, you know? And so it really is unexpected and quite tragic that Mr. Lake has left us. But I think it's a testimony to who he is that he's also left behind quite a large legacy. Not only in ACAN, institution which he formed to build greater awareness around chronic diseases in Anguilla and in the region. His work wasn't only concentrated in Anguilla. He carried his legacy far and wide beyond Anguilla's shores, and he was a staunch advocate for Anguilla wherever he was, but also in his work within the Ministry of Social Development and Health. And I dare say I don't know many people in Anguilla who don't know Pau. I don't know of him because he has a larger-than-life personality. He had a larger-than-life personality, and I can only hope that we will keep his legacy alive through the work that we do. And I want to extend condolences to the family and everyone who mourned his loss at this moment. So I really want to extend my condolences. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay. The Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mrs. Quincy Gums Marie, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In keeping with the remarks from my honorable colleague, Deanne Kentish-Rogers, I too would like to extend my deepest sympathies to the friends and family of John Lake, better known as Pau. Pau is someone who, when he's for you, and everyone knows. And I'm happy to know and happy to say that he was in my corner. And whenever he had an opportunity to reach out and encourage or even defend in his own way, he would do so. And I think the last time he was in this house, a few weeks ago actually, was the last time him and I had a proper conversation. We saw each other in passing, but we had a proper conversation that day. And it's always that feeling that if you knew that was the last conversation, you would hold on to it a little bit more. And I share the sentiments of my colleague. I commend him in his death for the work he would have done to so boldly use his life's events to push knowledge and awareness about non-communicable and communicable diseases and encourage healthy lifestyles. And again, I mourn with those who mourn, and I thank him for his contribution to Anguilla. Madam Speaker, by way of notices, my ministry will be holding an open market day on Thursday, this upcoming Thursday, from 9 to 4 p.m. at the People's Market. Persons can feel free to stop by. There will be fish products, eggs, chicken, meats, vegetables, all locally produced on sale. And it's in our effort to produce food security, as has been the work of my ministry, and also to encourage persons to buy these items locally, as they are superior. And this is one of the ways that we try to create a market for them. I would like to end also by wishing all of Anguilla a happy Easter, and those who celebrate in different ways, whether it is by connecting through family, spending time in Island Harbor, infiltrating the Premier's family, are simply taking the time off to recuperate, to remember the reason for this celebration, this moment, Christ's resurrection, and the purpose of his death, to pave way for the sins that were not yet made in our lifetime. And he just threw off my thoughts with such a random statement. But either way, Madam Speaker, I extend my warm Easter wishes to all of those, and I ask for persons to remember it's more than looking for eggs and Easter egg hunts, and to take some time to just remember the reason for the season. And finally, in closing, I would like to wish the athletes tomorrow a safe and exciting day. I know that I come from a small school, and my two schools, both Omalulu and Morris Venterpool, are small schools. So we don't really approach there with the expectation to win the entire event. But what we do is to know that there are certain events that we will dominate, and that's fine enough by me. I know somebody, oh, but Jose, you don't have a red jacket on today. But and finally, in actual closing, also to wish the Premier and Minister of Infrastructure congratulations on tomorrow. It was a big team effort, I would say, in ensuring that Anguilla is at the point where we can move forward with our terminal and eventually our airway. And this is really a giant step for economic development for the people of Anguilla, and I would like to commend them in this House of Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. The member for Valley North is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to take the opportunity on behalf of the members of the parliamentary opposition to acknowledge the passing of Mr. John Lake. Everyone knows him affectionately as Pow. Pow was a member of the Valley North constituency, a proud member at that. He was a supporter, a friend, and a general individual who was quite encouraging. And Madam Speaker, when I heard about what had happened to him, I still had an expectation that he would have made it out of this okay, even when he left. And I was incredibly saddened, Madam Speaker, when I heard the news. Mr. Lake was a very aggressive and persistent person. We developed a relationship while I was working at the Anguilla Tourist Board, and he would always reach out to the various boards during those periods for sponsorship funding, to fund health fairs, being able to bring in individuals from across the region for cancer advocacy and other communicable diseases as well. And he never took no for an answer, and he would always persistently follow up. And because of his persistency, I also became an advocate for him to my various boards as well, to encourage them to give him something. One, because the causes were important, but also because this was definitely something that he was relentless and passionate about. He was also a huge advocate for members of our regional brothers and sisters who migrated to Anguilla and who are naturalized and living here. Persons who have had medical issues and may not have been able to advocate for themselves. He was someone who was constantly and persistently advocating for them. As a matter of fact, I would have come into contact with a number of individuals in my constituency who have had health issues who were not originally from Anguilla as a direct result of Mr. Lake. And those are relationships that I have been able to continue to develop and foster. Mr. Lake, as indicated before, if he was someone that he liked and appreciated, he was very upfront and vocal and honest about it. And as we celebrate his life and remember his memory, I will ask those who remain in the healthcare profession and those who remain as healthcare advocates to continue to advocate in the same vein that Mr. Lake has for so many years. I look forward to celebrating his life and legacy in the coming weeks, and I ask that the members of his family and his extended family, which are friends, near and far, because he also developed really amazing networking relationships with lots of different persons in the region and further afar. I would ask them to continue to hold strong and to continue to celebrate his life and legacy as the opportunities present themselves. Madam Speaker, I'd also like to wish all of the athletes tomorrow much success, to ask the parents, teachers, and general community and public to come out and support in any way that they can to the sports day that is going to happen tomorrow. I also want to take the opportunity to recognize another individual that has passed. Mrs. Shirley Maynard has passed away as well very recently, and to wish Jay and the other members of her family, my deepest sympathy. And of course, the Heiligers who recently buried their mom, to continue to wish them strength and support during these difficult times. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Member? Any other orders of the day? The Honorable Member for Island Harbour is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would have started by saying I came here today with a heavy heart because of the untimely passing of John C. Lake, better known as Pau. Madam Speaker, we were at a funeral last Saturday, and Pau was there, and he was still talking about health care and how much he was advocating for us to get a cancer center here, and so he give chemotherapy. He just was always energetic, and we'll miss him. And I just want to say that, we took pictures that day. He insisted on it. Maybe he had a premonition. And we took pictures together. Also for, it was an accident that took him away, and I too want us to pray for the driver, who I know is not taking this well. Certainly understandable. This is a time of forgiveness, Madam Speaker, as we get to the Easter season, Good Friday, and so it's hard to segue from that pain that we feel with the loss of Pau to talk about Festival Del Mar, which is in Island Harbor this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I hope everyone can come out and have a good time, but be safe, and also ask that anyone who is thinking about disrupting the proceedings that they should stay home. I want to thank the Royal Anguilla Police Force and the UK officers who are here, who will be there doing their duty to protect and to keep us safe, Madam Speaker, and hope that this will be one which is incident-free, and that people will have a good time, and the member for Road South can come and sneak in and have his delicacy. Nobody will be keeping an eye on it. Also, for the primary school athletes, I know tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock is the opening ceremony at the James Ronald Webster Park, and look forward to a good day of competition, but also one of fair play, and may the better school win, as long as the Green Gators of Vivian Vanderpool. So, Madam Speaker, I also want to thank you for today for allowing the members of the public to be in the gallery and for them to be able to express themselves. I do know that at times the formality of this House may restrict the enthusiasm that the public feels, and so I thank you today for your patience and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. After all, it's the people's house. Whoever wants to come in, come on in. We invite you all. Yes, and on behalf of the staff of the Assembly, we too wish to extend condolences. Of course, that's on my own behalf as well, to the family of John Lake, and to all those who mourn the loss of loved ones at this time. Of course, we wish all schools well on the island. There's only one winner, and hopefully that will be Green Gators. And I want to take this opportunity as well to invite the public to Island Harbor this weekend to Festival Del Mar. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lobster, crayfish, octopus, whelks, conchs, flying fish, you name it, we got it. What's that? May nothing unclean. You bless and eat, okay? You partake. So, and I repeat the sentiments of the Honorable Premier. If you're not coming for fun, please stay home. Don't come for anything else but fun. You know, we don't want any disruptions. And I just want to say in advance thanks to the Royal Anguilla Police Force who's going to be present. Thank you for all your services. And I don't know if I should say this one on record. So thanks again. And see you there this weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
Adjournment.
We can cook.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise to beg that this honorable House be adjourned sine die.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that this honorable House now stands adjourned sine die. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned sine die. Thank you, members. Happy Easter and God bless Anguilla.